The door that never opens. The steel door slammed shut. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just one heavy sound echoing through a narrow concrete hallway. For the man standing inside the cell, that sound meant something different than it did anywhere else in America. It meant the clock had started. Not a clock counting toward freedom. A clock counting toward death. Deep inside the Polunsky unit, some of the most dangerous convicted murderers in Texas spent years waiting for a date that could change everything. Some waited 10 years. Some waited 20. Some waited even longer. Every morning, they woke up in the same small concrete cell. Every night, they fell asleep under the same dim light. And every day, they knew one thing. Somewhere in the future, a final day might already be waiting for them. But what happens when a person spends years knowing that possibility exists? What does life look like inside one of America's most secure death row units? The answer begins far from the execution chamber. It begins with a prison hidden in the pine forests of East Texas. A prison built not for rehabilitation, not for second chances, but for permanent separation. The road leading to the Polunsky unit feels endless. Dense forests stretch for miles. Small towns disappear behind long highways. The landscape becomes quieter and quieter. Then the prison appears. Massive fences, guard towers, concrete buildings, layers of security designed to keep the outside world out and the inside world in. From a distance, it looks like any high-security prison. But inside, it operates differently. Very differently. Most prisons are built around movement. People go to work assignments. They attend classes. They exercise with others. They interact. Death row at Polunsky was built around isolation. Many inmates spent most of their day alone. The design itself reflected that purpose. Long corridors lined with individual cells. Steel doors instead of bars. Limited contact. Controlled movement. Every detail focused on security. For correctional officers, routine was everything. Routine created order. Order created safety. Every movement followed procedures. Every door opened according to strict rules. Every count was carefully completed. Nothing happened by accident. Because inside death row, mistakes could carry enormous consequences. The men living there came from different backgrounds, different cities, different childhoods, different crimes. But once they entered the unit, those differences became less important. The prison reduced life to routines. Wake up, meals, counts, exercise periods, mail, sleep, then repeat, again, and again, and again. Days blended together, weeks blended together, years blended together. Time moved strangely. For someone outside prison, a year can disappear quickly. Birthdays, vacations, holidays, family events, new jobs, new experiences. Inside a small concrete cell, time feels different. There are fewer landmarks, fewer changes, fewer memories separating one day from the next. Many former inmates have described how months seem to blur into a single continuous stretch of waiting. Waiting for appeals, waiting for legal decisions, waiting for news, waiting for something to change. Sometimes nothing changed at all. That waiting became part of daily life. The prison itself was highly controlled. Meals arrived through slots in the doors. Officers conducted regular security checks. Medical staff visited when necessary. Mail was inspected according to prison regulations. Movement happened only under supervision. The system was designed to minimize risks. Every policy existed for a reason. Every procedure reflected years of correctional experience. To outsiders, the environment seemed cold. Concrete walls, steel doors, bright security lights, narrow windows. But prison administrators viewed the facility through a different lens. Their responsibility was security. Their mission was maintaining order. And in a unit housing death row inmates, security concerns were always significant. Yet behind every cell door was still a human being, a person with thoughts, memories, regrets, families. Some inmates received letters regularly. Others rarely heard from anyone. Mail became important. Very important. A single envelope could change an entire day. News from family. Updates from attorneys. Messages from old friends. Sometimes good news. Sometimes bad news. Sometimes no news at all. The outside world continued moving. Children grew older. Parents aged. Neighborhoods changed. Technology changed. Entire decades passed. Meanwhile, life inside remained remarkably similar. That contrast could be difficult. Some inmates arrived before smartphones existed, before social media transformed communication, before many modern technologies became common. Years later, the world outside looked completely different. But inside the prison, the routine remained familiar. The isolation created another challenge. Human beings are social creatures. Conversations matter. Interactions matter. Even small moments matter. A greeting, a smile, a casual discussion. In highly restrictive prison environments, those moments become limited. Former inmates from various supermax and death row facilities have described how isolation changes their perception of time and relationships. Small events become significant. Minor changes become major developments. A simple letter can feel enormous. A legal update can dominate thoughts for weeks. The world becomes smaller, not physically, psychologically. That shrinking world is difficult for many people to understand. Most Americans never experience anything similar. Most people can walk outside whenever they choose, visit friends, drive somewhere new, take a vacation, change their surroundings. Inside death row, choices become limited, very limited, and yet life continues. Every day, every month, every year, the officers working there understood that reality better than anyone. Many had spent years inside the facility. Some spent decades. They learned the routines. They learned the personalities. They learned how important consistency could be. Professionalism mattered. Predictability mattered. The goal was maintaining a stable environment, an environment where procedures governed everything. Outside prison walls, public attention often focused on executions, news reports, court decisions, appeals, high-profile cases. Those stories attracted headlines. But inside Polunsky, daily life was often much quieter, less dramatic, more repetitive. The reality was not constant action. The reality was routine. Routine repeated thousands of times. Yet beneath that routine, another process was unfolding. The legal process. Because every inmate on death row still had access to appeals and legal review procedures. Cases moved through courts. Attorneys filed motions. Judges reviewed evidence. Years could pass between major developments. Sometimes inmates received encouraging legal news. Sometimes they received disappointing news. Sometimes they simply waited, and waited, and waited. Then, one morning, something happened. A correctional officer approached a cell carrying paperwork. Legal paperwork. The kind that could change everything. Inside death row, rumors traveled quickly. Even in an environment built around isolation. Someone had received major news. Nobody knew exactly what it meant. Nobody knew what would happen next. But everyone understood one thing. The waiting might finally be ending. And when the news became public, the entire unit would learn that one man's future had suddenly become far more certain than before. The news spread faster than anyone expected. Inside a prison built around silence, information still found a way to travel. A legal decision had been made. An execution date had been scheduled. For one inmate, years of uncertainty had suddenly turned into something concrete. A specific day, a specific month, a specific year. The calendar was no longer just a way to measure time. It had become a countdown. For most people, future dates represent possibilities. A birthday, a graduation, a wedding, a vacation. Inside Texas death row, an execution date carried a completely different meaning. It transformed every remaining day, every routine, every thought. The inmate at the center of the decision received official notification through legal channels. Attorneys explained the next steps. Appeals remained possible. Court filings could still occur. Nothing was completely finished. But the reality had changed. For years, the future had been uncertain. Now, it had a shape. The psychological impact was impossible to ignore. Correctional officers had seen it before. They understood how inmates often reacted when an execution date was announced. Some became quieter. Some focused intensely on legal appeals. Some spent more time writing letters. Others withdrew into themselves. Every person responded differently. There was no universal reaction, only individual human responses to extraordinary circumstances. The attorneys immediately went to work. Legal teams reviewed documents, court records, previous rulings. Every possible avenue received attention. The American legal system provides multiple layers of review in capital cases. The process can take many years, sometimes decades. The goal is accuracy. The consequences are too serious for anything less. As motions moved through the courts, life inside the Polunsky unit continued. Morning counts still happened. Meals still arrived. Security procedures remained unchanged. The prison did not stop because one inmate received an execution date. Routine remained routine. That consistency was part of the institution's design. Yet everyone understood that something important was happening. The legal system had entered a new phase. For the inmate, days suddenly felt different. Time that once seemed endless now appeared limited. Former death row inmates, whose sentences were later overturned, have described how an execution date can change a person's perception of every hour. Simple activities gain new significance. Letters become more meaningful. Memories become more important. Even ordinary routines can feel different. The future becomes harder to imagine. Meanwhile, family members faced their own challenges. Many lived far away. Some had maintained contact for years. Others had complicated relationships shaped by distance, time, and difficult circumstances. Now they were forced to confront questions they had hoped to postpone. Phone calls became more frequent. Letters became longer. Conversations became more emotional. Families often experience their own form of waiting during lengthy legal cases. They follow court decisions, monitor appeals, read news reports, hope for positive developments, fear negative ones. The legal process affects more than just the person inside the prison. Outside the prison walls, attorneys prepared filings. Inside courtrooms, judges reviewed documents. Reporters monitored developments. Advocacy groups on different sides of the issue followed the case closely. Death penalty cases often generate public attention because they involve complex questions about law, justice, punishment, and public safety. Different people view those questions differently. Some focus on accountability. Some focus on legal concerns. Some focus on victims and families. Others focus on the criminal justice system itself. The debates are often intense. But inside the prison, the reality remained personal. One individual, one cell, one calendar, one future that suddenly seemed much closer. Weeks passed, then months. Legal filings continued. Court decisions arrived. Some favored the inmates' arguments. Others did not. Each ruling carried enormous importance. Each decision shaped what might happen next. Correctional officers maintained professionalism throughout the process. Their role was not to decide legal questions. Their responsibility was operating the facility safely and according to policy. Every day required attention. Every shift required focus. Security could never become secondary, not even during high-profile cases. The prison environment demanded consistency. Yet even experienced staff members understood the emotional weight surrounding death row cases. They worked in an environment unlike almost any other correctional setting in America, an environment where legal decisions could dramatically alter a person's future. As the scheduled date approached, preparation increased. Not dramatic preparation, administrative preparation, procedural preparation. Correctional systems rely on procedures, written policies, detailed checklists, specific responsibilities. Every step carefully documented, everything designed to ensure that official processes follow established rules. The public often imagines death row as a place filled with constant tension. The reality is usually more complicated. Long periods of routine, long periods of waiting, long periods of uncertainty. Then suddenly, major developments. A court ruling, a legal breakthrough, an execution date, a stay, an appeal. The pace changes without warning, and everyone adapts. The inmate continued receiving mail, continued meeting attorneys, continued following legal developments. Hope remained part of the picture, because appeals still existed, because courts were still reviewing issues, because uncertainty had not completely disappeared. Hope can survive in unexpected places, even inside a maximum security prison, even during difficult circumstances. Human beings naturally search for possibilities. They imagine alternatives. They look for reasons to keep moving forward. That tendency does not disappear simply because someone is incarcerated. The legal battle intensified. Attorneys worked late into the night. Experts reviewed records. Arguments were prepared. Deadlines approached. Every filing mattered. Every word mattered. Meanwhile, the prison's routines remained remarkably unchanged. Breakfast arrived. Counts were conducted. Mail was distributed. Lights turned on. Lights turned off. The contrast was striking. Outside the prison, intense legal activity. Inside the prison, ordinary routine. Two completely different worlds connected by one case. Then another decision arrived. A major decision. The kind that could completely alter everything. The inmates' attorneys received the ruling first. They read every page carefully. Then they read it again, because the outcome was not what anyone expected. For years, the case had followed a familiar path. Now suddenly, the path had changed. News organizations began reporting the development. Legal experts started discussing its implications. Correctional officials received official notifications. Inside the Polunsky unit, rumors immediately began circulating. Something important had happened. Very important. Nobody knew all the details yet, but everyone could feel it. The execution date that had once seemed certain was no longer certain at all. A new legal question had emerged, one significant enough to stop everything, at least temporarily. And as attorneys rushed to prepare for the next phase of the battle, a new possibility appeared on the horizon, a possibility that nobody had seriously considered just weeks earlier. The possibility that the inmate might never reach the scheduled execution date at all. The ruling changed everything. For months, the prison had been preparing for a future that now seemed uncertain. The execution date remained on the calendar, but a new legal challenge had interrupted the process. Attorneys immediately began filing additional motions. Judges requested more reviews. Experts examined evidence once again. What had looked like the final chapter suddenly became another beginning. Inside the Polunsky unit, life continued. The steel doors still opened and closed according to schedule. Meals still arrived through the slots. Security counts still occurred every day. From the outside, nothing appeared different. But for the inmate at the center of the case, everything had changed. The countdown had stopped, at least for now. That uncertainty created a strange new reality. Before, there had been a date, a destination, a point in the future everyone could see. Now there was only another period of waiting. Weeks became months. Months stretched longer. The legal process moved carefully. Every document received scrutiny. Every argument was examined. Every decision carried enormous weight. Capital punishment cases often involve years of legal review because courts understand the seriousness of the outcome. The system moves slowly by design. Accuracy matters. Fairness matters. Procedure matters. Those principles shape every stage of the process. Meanwhile, the inmate returned to the familiar rhythm of prison life. Wake up, breakfast, count, exercise period, mail call, evening count, lights out. The same routine that had defined years of incarceration continued. Yet something felt different. The future had reopened. not necessarily toward freedom, not necessarily toward release, but toward uncertainty. And uncertainty changes people. Correctional officers noticed it. Attorneys noticed it. Family members noticed it. The certainty that once dominated the case had disappeared. In its place came questions. What would happen next? How long would the legal process continue? Would another execution date eventually be set? Would the courts reach a different conclusion? Nobody knew, and that lack of answers became its own challenge. Outside the prison walls, public attention increased. News organizations published updates. Legal analysts discussed the implications. Advocates on all sides followed every development closely. Death penalty cases often generate intense interest because they touch on fundamental questions about justice, punishment, and the role of government. Different people reached different conclusions. Some believed the sentence should proceed. Others believed additional review was necessary. Still others questioned the broader system itself. The debates continued. The courts continued. And inside the prison, the waiting continued. Years passed. The legal battle expanded. New hearings were scheduled. Additional evidence was reviewed. Witness statements were examined. The case evolved in ways few people could have predicted. What once appeared straightforward became increasingly complex. That complexity reflected the reality of many long-running legal cases. Time changes circumstances. Evidence ages. Technology advances. New information sometimes emerges. Courts must decide how those factors affect previous decisions. There are rarely simple answers. One of the most striking aspects of death row is how life can become divided into different eras. The early years, the appeal years, the years after major rulings, the years waiting for the next development. For inmates, attorneys, families, and correctional staff, each phase brings different challenges, different expectations, different emotions. The inmate's family continued writing letters. Some letters discussed legal developments. Others discussed ordinary life, birthdays, jobs, children growing older, family members aging. The outside world never stops moving, even when someone is incarcerated. That contrast remained powerful. Inside the prison, routine. Outside the prison, constant change. Technology advanced. Communities changed. Entire generations grew up. Yet the prison remained remarkably consistent. The same walls, the same procedures, the same security measures, the same long corridors lined with steel doors. For correctional officers, professionalism remained essential. They could not predict court outcomes. They could not influence legal decisions. Their responsibility remained unchanged. Maintain safety, follow policy, protect staff and inmates alike. The prison's mission continued regardless of what happened in the courts. Years later, another major ruling arrived. Then another. The legal process moved forward in steps, sometimes large, sometimes small. Each decision shaped the future. Each ruling became part of a much larger story. A story not just about one inmate, but about the entire system surrounding capital punishment. The public often focuses on dramatic moments, execution dates, court rulings, breaking news alerts. But much of the story happens in quieter moments. Attorneys reviewing documents late at night. Families waiting for phone calls. Judges studying case files. Correctional officers completing ordinary shifts. Those quieter moments rarely make headlines, yet they form the foundation of everything else. Eventually, the case reached another turning point, a significant one, not because it provided simple answers, but because it demonstrated something important about the legal system. The process itself mattered. The reviews mattered. The appeals mattered. The questions mattered. Whether people supported or opposed the death penalty, most agreed on one thing. The consequences were too serious for shortcuts, too serious for assumptions, too serious for anything less than careful examination. That principle shaped every stage of the journey. Inside the Polunsky unit, the inmate continued living within the structure of prison life. The cell remained the same. The routines remained the same. But the meaning of those routines had changed over time. What began as a period of waiting had become a lesson in uncertainty. What looked like an ending had become another chapter. And what seemed certain had become far more complicated. The story of death row is often portrayed as a simple countdown, a straight line from conviction to execution. The reality is usually more complex. Appeals, reviews, challenges, questions, years of legal work, years of waiting, years of uncertainty. That complexity is part of the reason these cases continue to generate discussion across America. They force difficult conversations about justice, accountability, rights, responsibility, and the role of punishment in society. As the years continued, one truth became impossible to ignore. The prison could control movement. It could control routines. It could control security. But it could not control time. Time moved forward regardless of legal outcomes, regardless of court rulings, regardless of prison walls. And time changed everyone involved. The inmate, the families, the attorneys, the officers, the judges, even the broader public watching from a distance. By the end of the journey, the most important question was no longer about a single date on a calendar. It was about what the process revealed, about the legal system, about punishment, about the enormous responsibility carried by courts and correctional institutions. The steel doors of the Polunsky unit still closed each night. The prison still stood among the pine forests of East Texas. The routines still continued. But the story had become larger than one inmate and larger than one case. It had become a story about how a society confronts its most serious crimes while trying to balance justice, fairness, and the rule of law. And long after the headlines faded, that question remained, not just inside the prison, but far beyond its walls.